Welcome to Third Eye Weekly. Joining us today is Christopher Swain, an environmental activist who has been swimming in polluter waterways and advocating for them for clean waterways since 1996. Thank you for joining us today, Christopher.
You're welcome.
So recently you've taken up the obstacle of swimming across the Gowanus Canal in Brooklyn. Why were you drawn to swim that waterway in particular?
Well, I think one reason is that when I was looking at the whole piece of it, so I was thinking about the UN's World Water Decade that was 2005 to 2015, and I was at the UN right as it was wrapping up. And you know, if you stand on the terrace there looking out over the East River, it's a beautiful view, but one of the things that occurs to you if you're a water guy is two of the dirtiest waterways in the country you can almost see from the United Nations, right? You can see Newtown Creek coming out, and you can see the Gowanus Canal. Well, you can't see it, but you know it's right down there around the corner. So I thought, you know, for all this talk that we do, saying, oh, if you want a really dirty waterway, you got to go to Asia or Eastern Europe or Africa, right? And they've got some bad stuff, sure. But right here at home in North America, there's some really troubling stuff that we haven't gotten around to cleaning up yet. So part of me wanted to say, instead of just calling that out, saying, hey, we haven't gotten around to this, do what I do. I'm a swimmer. Get in there, have an experience of it. And what I was hoping to do with that was let people know that there was actually cause for hope. There had been a little bit of progress, and that I thought it was worth pushing for more of that, saying, let's not just speed up the cleanup, but let's say, before we call it clean, or before we do a partial cleanup, or before we say good enough 20 years from now, let's put it back into human terms. Let's say, what if clean is safe to swim every day? That's something you can understand without a science degree, right? So that was what was driving me on the Gowanus thing, and the same will be for Newtown Creek. Like, I'm a swimmer, I want to swim in clean water, and even if the Gowanus Canal is the most messed up waterway in North America, I have this crazy dream that it could be a jewel, that it could be gleaming in the sun and kids would swim in it after school, you know, this kind of thing.
So what are some of the most hazardous toxins in the Gowanus River, and how did you prepare for that, swimming in that toxin?
Well, first step is you got to do your research, right? You got to figure out what is in there. And it's sometimes easier with the Gowanus to think of it in two layers. So there's the water column, and then there's the muck at the bottom. So we could start with the muck at the bottom. They call it black mayonnaise because that's the consistency of it. And it's a 10 to 20 foot layer of toxic muck that's down there, which I could poke into with my feet as the tide was going out when I was swimming, which is alarming. And what's in there is everything that we ever dumped into this industrial waterway over the last 300 years. So that's toxic chemicals like PCBs, that's heavy metals like arsenic and mercury, that's coal tar residue from back when we were burning coal to make, you know, heat the steam that heated the buildings in Brooklyn. All that stuff's down there. And there's a few fun facts, like the EPA is going to take 600,000 cubic yards of that out over the next 20 years. And because of the coal tar residue, some of that stuff's so flammable, they're actually going to be able to burn it for energy, if that gives you a sense of how bad it was. The other piece is sort of the mythic piece of the Gowanus Canal, the sort of the organized crime part of it, which is if you talk to the police or if you talk to some of the older immigrant populations, their stories about the Gowanus are about who was thrown in there because they did this or that, or what evidence was discarded in the canal after this crime or that crime. I think the guy who wrote the book Motherless Brooklyn said that the Gowanus is the only waterway in the world that's 90% guns. So who knows what's down there? But that all needs to be scooped out. Then the other piece is the water itself. So why is the water dirty? Well, obviously if you throw dirty stuff in, it gets dirty. But the big reason is just a plumbing issue. So many of these older cities, whether it's Boston or New York or Newark, the pipes went in before we had a sense of where we hope to be as a nation around the environment, around water. So another way to say that is, in the old days, it was normal to send your sewage straight into the nearest waterway. That's what everyone did. So it wasn't this difficult choice, good versus evil. It was like, hey, that's what we do. So imagine there's all these pipes under New York City, and I'm not singling out New York, all the big cities have it. that goes straight to the nearest waterway. So in Brooklyn, they're going to the Gowanus Canal. Okay, and then when it rains, water's going down the storm drain system. So back in the day, that's fine. It could go into the same pipes, and those same pipes could go in. Who cares if rainwater, meltwater, sewage, it's all going in. Okay, flash forward to the time in history when people started thinking, you know, maybe we shouldn't put raw sewage into the waterways. Then we're into building sewage treatment plants and stuff like that. And that starts by connecting those pipes to the plant, saying, whoa, we can't just have a straight pipe into a waterway. We should run it through the plant, treat the stuff, and let it go. And that's fine on most days. But if it rains, for instance, if more than a 20th of an inch of rain falls in Brooklyn, then there is too much water in those pipes. Now you've got pipes that have sewage in them from the buildings and the homes, and you've got rainwater filling those pipes, and you've got walls of water, thousands of gallons a second, heading into these sewage treatment facilities, right? But they can't handle that amount of volume because it's way too much. Very quickly, if you do the math, you're into millions of gallons and you can't do it. So, or you can't do it all at once. So what happens then is they have to open the gates and send that stuff right in, which means every time you get a big, what we would call stormwater event, big rainstorm that goes on for very long, in any of our big cities, what you're going to get is raw sewage in the waterways. So that's the first piece for a swimmer. Like, has it rained in the last 3 days? Because if it has, you could be swimming in all sorts of bacteria, viruses, and protozoans. The other things are things that you would probably guess would be in there. So there's oil and gas on the surface. There's foam that looks like sea foam, but really it's emulsified fats and grease from the storm drain system, from restaurants and wherever else that have been boiled up by what's coming in from the flushing tunnel. And that stuff appears as foam, but it slimes your suit and your gloves. And you can feel that. The oil and gas that would end up on the streets. It doesn't take much for that stuff to get in. You know, even a small rainstorm, you're going to see rainbow sheens on all the puddles, right? Well, that stuff will all be in the canal as well. Bubbling up from underneath from this black mayonnaise is also some of the residual stuff. So we mentioned burning coal for energy back in the day, right? So those coal tar residues are still down there in the muck, and they bubble up and they show up as these contained sort of oval-shaped rainbow slicks that are floating along the top of the Gowanus Canal as well. And so when you're dealing with oil, gas, petroleum-based residues, you're dealing with the VOCs, the volatile organic compounds you don't want to breathe. You mess up your brain. You get that stuff in your body. Some of it's hard to get out. I mean, we joke about, like, you know, when I was little, I liked the smell of gasoline. And I think there's people who are like, yes, you know, I've experienced what can happen to my brain when I smell gasoline. One of the things that's happening is it's doing a massive amount of damage in a short time, and your body's responding to that as best it can. And that's a lot of the feelings, the sensations you're having are the sensation of a complete neural destruction and your body trying to respond. The other side of that is that's not the best experience you would have as a swimmer. So in terms of what I'm doing to protect myself, my plan when I went into the Gowanus was, how can I limit my exposure in every possible way? So the first thing that I decided to do is, we'll try to come up with a strategy where I get almost no water on my body at all. Second thing I'll do is I won't put my head under. I'll swim like my grandmother, like do the breaststroke with my head up, you know, like she was doing that to protect her hair, right? Because she was from the generation, like, I think you went and did your hair once a week and that was it. You're not messing it up. You're not getting it wet till the next week, right? That's grandma. Another piece of it was pick my day so that I don't end up in there with sewage. Actually, the day I swam the Gowanus Canal, it met the swimming standard for sewage, which people can't believe, but we timed it out so it would. And because it hadn't rained in a couple of days when I swam, I also avoided a lot of the oil and gas slicks. And we cooperated with the city, so they moved the boom that caught a lot of and holds a lot of those, the foamy emulsified fats and grease. So a lot of that stuff got to go down, so I wouldn't go through concentrated areas of that. So I planned that. And then in terms of my actual body and my exposure protection, I wore this dry suit. So a dry suit is not like a wetsuit. It's a suit that you can get into through a big zipper here, but it's designed to keep water off your body. And here's how it does that. It does it through a system of seals. I don't know if I can get the wrist seal out, but basically what you're doing is you're sealing the wrists, you're sealing the feet, and you're sealing at the neck. And then these are watertight zippers that you close once you get in. So basically no water touches your body would be the simple way to talk about that. Then on my head, I wore swim cap, goggles, earplugs, and we're still dealing with exposed skin and hair. So I put non-petroleum water barrier cream, basically ointment, all over everything else. And I use non-petroleum because petroleum-based products will break down the seals on a suit, right? It'll break down the neoprene and the latex. So you can't use Vaseline, for instance. So that just left my mouth exposed. So we had a two-part plan for getting exposed to stuff in my mouth. Part one was, if I got water in my mouth, which you do swimming, right? Even if you don't want to, then I would gargle with hydrogen peroxide solution. The same stuff you dump on your cut, maybe if you cut your finger. So that's a 1.5% hydrogen peroxide solution. That'll kill or really mess up bacteria, viruses, and protozoans. Also, when you're swishing stuff around in your mouth and you spit it back out, what we found over the past swims over the last 20 years is a lot of stuff comes back out. Like rinsing your mouth actually turns out to be a pretty good way to get things out of your mouth. It sounds intuitively like it would be true, but it actually is. The other piece is if I swallowed water, then I thought, okay, now I got an issue. Then we just approached it like, what if you got poisoned and you went to the ER? Not that it's poison, but there is all kinds of stuff like arsenic and who knows what in there. And we thought, all right, we'll just use activated charcoal tablets. So you know if somebody overdoses or something and it gets far enough into their system in the hospital setting, they're gonna give you activated charcoal. And the reason they're doing that is that'll bind with all kinds of toxins and compounds in your body. It'll bind them up and then pass them through. And it's convenient, low impact way to deal with that. And once stuff's in your system, that's what you have to do, right? And it's not like we're gonna pump my stomach because I swallowed a Gowanus canal. So I had activated charcoal tablets there with me that I could have taken if I swallowed any water, but I didn't. Not to say I won't on a future attempt, but that's the basic thing. So keep the water out of me and off of me was really my approach. And then stay out of the mud, you know?
So did you end up tasting any of the water? I know you didn't swallow any of it. And also, what was the cleanup process like afterwards, getting out of the suit?
Yes, I definitely tasted the water. So the thing about swimming in dirty water is you can often identify different things because we have a lot of architecture in our brains around smell and taste, more than people probably realize, more than I realize because I'm not a neuroscientist. But when you're worried about what you might be tasting and what you might be smelling, I almost think it's a heightened experience. So here's what I tasted. Some combination of mud, poop, detergent, oil, gas, leaves, and that grainy feeling in my mouth that I describe as like if you had a bad green drink or a bad green smoothie and you're like, that wasn't very good, but you still have that like sandy feeling in your mouth and you want to be like, oh, thanks for that. That's great. So now I have to rinse my mouth and that costs $6 too, right? You know, so it's like that. And it's funny, but the other part of it is it's disturbing too, right? And then in terms of the cleanup, the major thing that I'm worried, so the cleanup is sort of a two-prong thing. First prong is if you didn't get anything in you, then it's just stuff that's on you and on your gear, right? On your suit and on your, you know, exposed skin, which is covered with the waterbury cream. Most stuff will just rinse off, right? Like you can rinse off chemicals, you can rinse off, if they haven't penetrated, you can rinse off nettles and stuff like particulates. So then it's, was there some sewage in the water? Yes, there was, this kind of thing, not high amounts. So then it becomes, can we kill the bacteria and viruses that might be on my gear and on me? And the simple answer to that is yes. So beyond hosing yourself off, what you can do is simple decontamination, which would be along the lines of get the 5-gallon Home Depot bucket, fill it up with water, dump a couple capfuls of bleach in there, and now you've got a weak bleach solution that's gonna play havoc with bacteria, viruses, and protozoans. You can dump that right over yourself and you're gonna get pretty far. The city, in particular, the police department was concerned about where I was gonna do my decontamination. Their position with their marine unit and scuba unit is when those guys end up in the canal, they treat it like a hazmat, like squirt off them in their gear with a fire hose and all that. I don't see it quite the same way based on my research, but I understand, you know, they're doing that. They're worried about workers' comp, all this kind of stuff, right? So I think there's a way you can hose off and decontaminate in a simple way that works. So that plan worked for the city. It's not as amped up as it could be. And then you just move on with your life. The problem is, of course, I had to stop because of thunderstorms. So I didn't get to swim the whole canal. So lucky me, I had to find time in June to go back and actually complete the thing. So, okay. So the suit will be back out and back to work, right?
Wow. So this is such a selfless act to kind of put on all these dangers, potential lifelong dangers, to go into this contaminated water. What gave you the idea that you yourself wanted to go in there and put your life at risk just for the betterment and awareness of, you know, polluted waterways?
I think there's a two-part answer. One part is I always love the water. So the part of me that's a swimmer wants to swim, almost wants to take back that space. So if you can imagine that the Gowanus Canal, and this is really hard to imagine, I understand, had a moment as a pristine waterway, or it will again someday. But somehow, because of the choices we've all made and the fact that it was industrial waterway for hundreds of years, that sort of idea of the clean Gowanus Canal got stolen from us. The act of swimming feels like stealing it back, or stealing back the idea that this could be a safe place to swim. So that's part of it. The other part is, I think, culturally, nothing changes unless someone's willing to put their ass on the line. So I think if you're really serious about making a change, and it's connected to something that you believe in, like I believe in swimming in clean water, then it might be worth considering putting yourself directly into it, putting yourself on the line. I also think there's a credibility piece there. Like, nobody's gonna welcome my thoughts about the Gowanus Canal because it'll end up being like, well, who are you? You know, you might be, maybe you were born in New York, but you know, you haven't lived here since you were 9 months old. Now you live in Massachusetts, which probably means you're a Red Sox fan, and you know, you should shut up and go home. Like, that's where that's gonna go, right? Yeah. But if you say, you know what, I love the water, I've been swimming in dirty waterways my whole life, trying to figure out what we can do to clean them up, and this is one more of those, and I'm just gonna go in there and have an experience of it and share that experience. I think if you're willing to swim in the Gowanus Canal, people are willing to hear what that experience was like. So it creates a bit of a platform there.
So maybe aside from each of us swimming the Gowanus Canal, what are some things you think we could do as a collective to really start to, you know, expedite these changes?
Imagine there's a list, and there really is, right, of Superfund sites, the national priorities list. And you know how lists work in our lives. Like, you look at your list in the morning and you're like, oh, you know, this doesn't look good. So what's the first thing you do with your list? Like, all right, is there anything on this list that I'm willing to start by doing? You're gonna pick the easiest thing on the list, or the thing that people are harassing you the most about, right? I mean, if you're getting a lot of heat for something on your list, you're like, all right, well, I guess we're doing that. I don't wanna do that, but we're doing it. So if you imagine there's a lot of waterways out there that after the Clean Water Act passed, which is the federal legislation, 1972, that basically said we're gonna clean up all navigable waterways so they're fishable, so they're swimmable, and so they're safe for boating and paddling, okay? Those are actually your federal rights, and the Gowanus would fall right under that. It's a navigable waterway, just like Newtown Creek would or the Hudson River would. Some of those waterways got cleaned up, and some of them they haven't gotten around to yet. And my sense, I'm not a politician, but my sense of why those things happen is that the bigger the fan base a waterway has, the more connected people are asking for something, the sooner it gets done. So it's no surprise to me that the Hudson River got cleaned up pretty quickly in that process. I understand there's still a bit of a way to go with the Hudson, but if you swam in the Hudson now on a day when it wasn't raining, That's not a crazy thing anymore. I mean, it might be a little edgy because not everyone swims in rivers, but that's a doable thing now. No one paddles on the Hudson on their kayak and thinks, oh, I'm taking my life in my hands, you know, this kind of thing. Not anymore. So that's come a long way. And I think it's come a long way because a lot of people like the Hudson. A lot of people stared at it every day. A lot of well-connected people rode the train up and down there to and from work, and they knew people who worked in the government. So it's pretty easy to see how that got pretty high up on the list. What the Gowanus doesn't have is a group of people who really, and by a group of people, I mean a large group of people who really love and appreciate it, right? It doesn't have fans. It doesn't have advocates. It has a few, but it's in no way a mainstream activity advocating for the Gowanus Canal. What the Gowanus has is people who try to avoid the stench of it when the wind's right in the summer, right? Or look away from it when they're going to Whole Foods, or ride their bikes across the bridges really fast so they don't have to have that experience, or don't want to look at the trash. So what I'm thinking is if you shine a light on something like the Gowanus Canal or on Newtown Creek, people are going to get to know it, and people that might not have known it before. If you point out that there's cause for hope, that there's actually a little progress, that actually we have a right to pushing the cleanup far enough that we could swim in it, then I think people might get to the point where they think, well, okay, so we're getting somewhere. It sounds like it's doable. Then hopefully even get from there to why not? Hey, why not? Why not make the Gowanus Canal a diamond? Sounds insane, but it also sounds like a cool idea. So what I was hoping with the swim is to get more into that space, like shine the light, introduce more people to the canal, hopefully make the canal more friends, and then hopefully there's a larger group of people to say, all right, yeah, that's great. We like the canal. There's cause for hope. Let's get it done. Let's go the whole way. Let's get it safe for swimming every day.
Well, I think you've definitely got us as fans now. Christopher,
Yeah,
thank you
definitely.
so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Oh, you're welcome. And thanks for letting me do my show and tell.
Anytime.